Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and this is my video for the 10 best parallel universe and alternate timeline episodes in Star Trek. This list is based on my opinion and my opinion alone. Keep that in mind, because some of the things that I'm going to say here in this video is very much a minority opinion. Like, I may be one of the few who thinks some of the things that I'm going to say, but I am always going to be honest about my opinion. I am not here just to regurgitate what the masses think, although in some cases that will also be true, because some of my opinion also lines up with what a lot of people also think. But keep that in mind as we go through. Now, I did want to mention briefly that, as I said last month in my best time travel video, that I decided to include some alternate timeline episodes with the parallel universe category rather than the time travel category. And I really do think it fits, because we're looking at what if scenarios, which in the Marvel Universe is a parallel universe, and we are looking at alternate versions of our characters, alternate histories. It kind of is like a parallel universe, and in some cases you don't even see the time travel happen on screen, or you barely see it. So I do think that they fit here. Now, last week when I did my worst video, I mentioned that I was only doing 5 on my worst list, but there were still 5 other episodes that I just don't think are bad enough to be on my worst list, but they also don't fit into my top 10 best list. So I'm going to talk about those now as some honorable mentions. Okay, the first honorable mention is the alternative factor from Star Trek, the original series. Now, this is where I get the comment on my video that says, "You lost credibility the minute you said that the alternative factor was a good episode. You must declare the alternative factor the worst episode in the history of Star Trek, or you are not a true Star Trek fan." No, honestly, I don't get all the hate to this episode. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's amazing. Notice it did not make my top 10. But I don't think it's an awful episode. The common complaints seem to be that there's junk science. Yeah, have you seen the TOS? It's based on junk science, the whole thing. Another complaint, the overacting. Again, have you watched TOS? Have you seen the overacting that William Shatner does on a regular basis? I don't understand why this episode gets lopped in with objectively bad episodes like Spock's Brain and A Way to Eden. I just don't see it. Now, it doesn't make my top 10 best either, because I think it's a little slow. I think they could have done a little more showing rather than telling, but I also think it was a really interesting concept and a really kind of heady psychological thriller. So I don't see why it's so horrible, but it also doesn't make my top 10 best list. It's here in the honorable mention section. Next, we have a pair of Deep Space Nine episodes, Season 3's Through the Looking Glass and Season 4's Shattered Mirror, or as I like to call them, the Jennifer Chronicles. Actually, I don't like to call them that. I just made that up just now. But they are both episodes that show us Jennifer from the Mirror universe. And through the Looking Glass, Ben Sisko first encounters the Mirror Jennifer, and then in Shattered Mirror, Jake Sisko gets to meet Mirror Jennifer, and then, spoiler alert, she dies at the end of that episode. Now, I have said in the past that I really do feel like each successive Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episode is a little bit lower quality than the episode before it. So the second season version, Crossover, will be on my list later on in the top 10. The next one after that, Through the Looking Glass, was still a pretty strong episode, just not anywhere near as good as Crossover, in my opinion. And then we had Shattered Mirror, which is good. I don't know that we necessarily needed to see Jake meet Jennifer after we already saw Ben meet her, but that was fine. But I do think they needed to stop right there. I don't think they needed to do any more. And lo and behold, the 2 episodes that come after it in this Mirror Universe saga in Deep Space Nine are on my worst list. So it's a solid episode, but not good enough for my top 10. And my last honorable mentions are a pair of Star Trek Discovery first season episodes, Despite Yourself and Vaulting Ambition. This is part 1 and part 3 of the 4-part Mirror Universe saga in the first season of Star Trek Discovery, so you can infer from this that parts 2 and 4 of that first season Mirror Universe saga are somewhere in my top 10. Now here's where I get the other complaining comments. What? You didn't put the amazing, infallible, awesome Deep Space Nine episodes in, but you put this crappy Star Trek Discovery episodes in. Don't you know, Star Trek Discovery is the worst thing that's ever happened to humankind. There are a lot of Discovery haters, and while I don't think Discovery is anywhere near being the best Trek show, and I also don't think it's had its truly great season yet, that may still be to come, I do think that Discovery has done some great things here and there, and one of those great things is that 4-part Mirror Universe saga in the first season, and I wish that I could fit Vaulting Ambition Part 3 in here, because I loved that episode too. I almost want to do a top 11 just so I could have it on there. And Despite Yourself was the first episode of this saga and more of a setup, but it was pretty solid as well. But overall, I absolutely loved that 4-part Mirror Universe story in the first season of Discovery, and I'm going to talk about it more when I get into my top 10. And those are my honorable mentions, the episodes that I don't think are bad enough to be on the worst Parallel Universe episode list, but I couldn't squeeze them into the top 10 best list either, so they're kind of in the middle there. So now that those are out of the way, let's get into the top 10 proper, starting with my number 10. Number 10! At number 10, Terra Firma Parts 1 and 2 from the 3rd season of Star Trek Discovery. These episodes marked the big send-off for the Emperor Georgiou character, and I really loved how they showed us just how far this character actually has come. I mean, we kind of think of her as this mean and nasty, stereotypical Mirror Universe character, but when she is put into the Mirror Universe and goes back in time and tries to change things in her Mirror Universe past, we see actually that in contrast to the other Mirror Universe characters, she actually is a really good person, has developed a really big heart, has a lot of sympathy for Saru, helps him out, has a lot of sympathy for Michael Burnham, and that's really kind of her downfall because the other Mirror Universe characters don't really understand that. But it's not something you could see very clearly when she's surrounded by Prime Universe characters, but when you see it here, it really makes a lot of sense. So I thought this was a really well-written pair of episodes. And now I have to address the Guardian of Forever of it all, because I know there's various opinions on whether or not you liked the Guardian of Forever and how it was rebooted here. Personally, I think that a talking gate with steam coming out of it is an antiquated 1960s idea that needed to be updated, and I love the concept of it being an entity that can take different forms. I also love the concept of it being involved, or not wanting to be involved, rather, in the temporal war and trying to run away from everybody so that they can't use it for their own evil deeds. Loved that and love these episodes overall, and they come in at number 10 on my list. Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9. At number 9 in the Mirror Darkly Parts 1 and 2 from Star Trek Enterprise. This was a really unique concept in that it was the first episodes to take place entirely in the mirror universe without any of our Prime Universe characters to mess things up and to try to figure out what's happening and blah, 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 blah. No, I thought that was a really good idea to do this, and they were able to work in a lot of nostalgia by finally answering the question from the Tholian Web, the original series episode, what the hell happened to the Defiant? It apparently not only crossed universes, but went back in time and is discovered by the Mirror Universe Archer. Now, these episodes aren't perfect. I don't know that Scott Bakula, to be honest with you, is really great at playing evil, but they kind of tried to cover over that by having him be psychotic and doing a Gollum thing, which that worked. That all worked for me. But overall, I just love these episodes, and I just love the freedom that the writers have to just throw in the Gorn, let's throw in the Tholians, and let's throw in the old uniforms, and actually told a really interesting story. So absolutely love this pair of Enterprise Mirror Universe episodes.
8 ball corner pocket, baby. Number 8.
At number 8, The Wolf Inside from Star Trek Discovery Season 1. So this is part 2 of that 4-part Mirror Universe saga from Season 1. So this one, I thought took a big risk. I thought it was pretty ambitious to try to combine the Ash Tyler is really Vogue story with the Mirror Universe storyline that they had started in the previous episode. But you know what? It worked so well because they did it by having Ash Tyler, or the Prime Universe Vogue, encounter the Mirror Universe folk, who's the leader of these rebels, and they're uniting with different species, and Prime Universe folk doesn't like that. He's kind of a Nazi. He thinks that Klingons are the pure race, and so that brings him out of Ash Tyler, and that just starts a whole bunch of different things. This is also the episode where he kills Culber, so we've got two things happening simultaneously. They're trying to find their way out of the Mirror Universe, and they're dealing with Ash Tyler actually being a secret Klingon, and you wouldn't think that would work, but it works so well. This is such a well written episode, and just exemplifies why I love these episodes in the first season of Discovery. So, speaking of why I love these episodes in the first season of Discovery, at number 7, What's Past is Prologue. This is the finale of that 4-part Mirror Universe saga of the first season of Discovery, and quite honestly, I think it's vastly superior to the actual Season 1 finale, which was all over the place, much like the season itself, and very forgettable. I don't even really remember the actual season finale that much, but I love this episode. This is where the saga comes to a dramatic conclusion, with the battle for the Empire coming to a head. Giorgio versus Lorca, each of them trying to get Michael Burnham on their side, and Lorca's downfall, of course, is failing to recognize just how deep Michael Burnham's guilt runs for the death of Captain Giorgio from the Prime Universe. It is so deep that she will do anything for Emperor Giorgio, even save her life and take her over to the Prime Universe at the end of this episode. Now, of course, we got the Lorca reveal in the previous episode at the very, very end, though this is the first full episode where we get to see the fully revealed Mirror Universe Lorca. Now, I have to address this because I know that there are some people who really hated this twist. Others love it. Personally, I'm on the love it side of things. I thought this was a well-planted twist. there were seeds planted all throughout the season, and it made a lot of sense. And most of all, it really shows how much the Mirror Universe storytelling has grown since Mirror Mirror. It really started in Deep Space Nine, where things started getting a little bit more nuanced and complex. But here, this episode proves Spock wrong when he said, "Oh, it's easier for you as civilized men to pretend to be barbarians than it was for these barbarians to pretend to be civilized men." Not so fast. Lorca did a pretty good job of it, and I love that he was able to pass himself off as a Prime Universe captain, one who has gone through some trauma and is behaving strangely, but still people bought it. Even the audience of the show bought it. So I thought it worked so well. And overall, love this episode. Kind of wish it was the actual season finale of the first season.
Number 6.
At number 6, Twilight from Star Trek Enterprise. And yes, I am aware that the entire first half of this list is all Enterprise and Discovery. And I promise you that will no longer be the trend in the top 5. There will be no more Enterprise and Discovery after this point. But here at number 6, we get our first alternate timeline episode in this countdown. So this is the one where Archer gets Memento Syndrome, or 51st Dates Syndrome if you prefer, where he can only remember back a few hours at a time, and he just lives this way for years, and he's unable to continue as captain of the Enterprise. So T'Pol takes over, and I guess T'Pol really sucks at being a captain because she causes the Earth to be destroyed and the Xindi win everything. And there's a very interesting story about the survivors of Starfleet being on the run from the Xindi. Very Battlestar Galactica-esque, if I might say. Very interesting. And the episode largely takes place in a future where T'Pol, due to her guilt for feeling like she caused Archer to get the disease that he got, that she's now taking care of Archer. So this really deeply explores this relationship between these two characters and what it would look like in this scenario. And it's still a very platonic one, but a very deep and very close one. So I found that aspect, the character aspect, most fascinating about this episode, but it also just told a really dark and interesting story about a possible future, which thankfully they are able to save, so that Archer is able to, be captain again, and none of this ever happens. But this was a really good episode. Number 5. At number 5, A Quality of Mercy from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So this is another alternate timeline episode. This, of course, is the episode that answers the question, what if Captain Pike was the captain of the Enterprise during the original series episode, A Balance of Terror? Now, this is a great homage to The Balance of Terror, but that's not the main reason that I love this episode. You can't just simply throw characters back into an original series episode and make an homage to that episode and automatically call it great. That would be Trials and Tribulations. Overrated! Overrated! Excuse me, sorry. I had a little cough there. Yeah, no. This doesn't just simply make an homage to an original series episode. This has an excellent character story, and in this case, it is one that has been built up to for the entirety of the season, and this episode was the season finale, so the storyline they have been building up all season ends in a dramatic climax. And it was such a powerful character story. And I think that's what makes all of these alternate timelines, all these what-if scenario episodes great, is that they all have really strong character stories, such as the one I just mentioned, Twilight, with Archer and T'Pol, and also the one that I will get to a little bit later on in this video. Alternate timeline episodes in Star Trek can be really good when they tell really powerful character stories. And that is what this one does. Also, yes, it was cool to have the nostalgia and to see what it would have been like to have Pike as captain of the Enterprise during that episode, and to see some of the same events play out the same way, some of the same music used. That was all great as well, but it's the character story that really makes this a great alternate timeline episode, and it is number 5 on my list.
Number 4. Woo!
At number 4, Parallels from Star Trek The Next Generation. So this is back to the parallel universe side of things, and it's the only parallel universe episode on this list that does not involve the mirror universe. In fact, it's only one of 3 episodes that I can even think of in all of Star Trek that are technically about a parallel universe but don't involve the mirror universe, the other 2 being Counterclock Incident and Alternative Factor. This one, though, I love so much because I love this concept. I love the concept that there are an infinite number of universes, and the ones that are close to ours are so close that you can barely even tell the difference. It's just the painting is in a different place, or you get a little bit further away and the birthday party didn't happen that did happen in our universe. And as you get further and further away, you end up with Riker as captain and Worf as first officer and Wesley Crusher as the security chief. And I love that so much, and I love the mystery of it all as Worf is figuring out what is happening as he's moving from universe to universe. And especially loved the ending when all the different enterprises were filling up the space, and we get the haunting image of the disheveled, long-bearded Riker from the universe where the Borg won, begging not to be sent back to his universe where the Borg are everywhere. Ooh, so chilling. This episode was so good, and I loved they used Worf as the main character because it was a little bit different than what he usually does. It has nothing to do with any Klingon honor or any bullshit like that. It was such a different episode for him, and I really, really loved the choice. So this episode, one of my favorite of all time, and it is number 4 on my list of best parallel universe and alternate timeline episodes.
Number 3.
At number 3, yesterday's Enterprise from Star Trek The Next Generation. This is the top alternate timeline episode on this list of parallel universe and alternate timeline episodes. This very much plays like a parallel universe, though. This is what if the Federation was at war with the Klingons, and also, by the way, Tasha Yar is still alive. So I spoke earlier about how good alternate timeline episodes really focus in on good character stories, and this one is unique because the character story that is really most prominent and really most unique in this episode is about a character who died a couple years earlier and hadn't been on the show in a couple of years. But watching Tasha Yar's struggle with the realization that she died a meaningless death in the other timeline, and where does she go from here? That was so fascinating. Also, I named the romance between her and Lieutenant Frank Castillo as one of my top romances in Star Trek when I did that topic a couple months ago, because it was just so genuine and real, and the show did not try to pretend that it was anything other than it actually was, which is just 2 people who had just met and wished they had more time together. And it was really beautiful. The ending as well was really beautiful. I could do without the Romulan daughter that comes, Sela, I guess, that comes in the next season, but just this episode on its own was absolutely fantastic, and it is number 3 on my list.
Just the 2 of us. Number 2, number 2.
And at number 2, Mirror Mirror from the original series. You knew this had to be up here somewhere. This is the OG Mirror Universe episode. This is the episode that started it all, and I will always have a place in my heart for this episode. This is not only the first Mirror Universe episode, but for me, it was my first introduction to the entire concept of parallel universes, something that I would find fascinating for years and years to come in all sorts of fiction, television, film, books, etc., etc. And it is all because of this episode. I have seen it a gazillion times, and I still get chills every time they step off that transporter pad and we see the evil Spock torturing the evil Lieutenant Kyle and the music playing dun 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 dun. There would be no other Mirror Universe episodes without this one first, so I have to rank it at number 2. However, there is one Mirror Universe episode that I think did improve upon it, and that's what I'm going to talk about for my number 1. Number 1! And at number 1, crossover from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So if you disagreed with my choice to put some Discovery episodes ahead of Through the Looking Glass and Shattered Mirror, then hopefully this makes up for it just a little bit, that I do consider crossover to be the best Mirror Universe episode, and therefore the best parallel universe episode in Star Trek. It took that concept that Mirror started and ran with it and made it more interesting and a little more nuanced, and it's turned things on its head because now the Terran Empire has been conquered, humans are now being treated like slaves, and the Alliance rules the galaxy. So it is a really, really interesting take on what the original series had started many years earlier. This episode also does something that Mirror never did do, which is to have two versions of the same character meet each other. And Nana Visitor crushed it in this episode. Sometimes people badmouth her acting ability. I have no idea why. She is so good, especially in this episode. And Intendant Kira in this episode is still a really interesting character. This is before she completely goes over the top in those couple of episodes that I mentioned on my worst list, the season 6 and 7 versions of the Mirror Universe saga, which never should have happened. But this, to me, is just such a great episode, and it has so many lines in it that have stuck with me. Avery Brooks does best when he gets to play a little bit crazy. So I still, to this day, will quote the line, "Well now, that small creative than he usually gets." He's so good. I missed Mirror Universe Cisco in the other episodes because he's dead, and so we just get regular Cisco in there. But this was so good, and it is my number 1 parallel universe and alternate timeline episode in Star Trek. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me here for my top 10 best parallel universe episode list. Next month, join me as I will do 2 different categories, 4 videos in all. I'm going to do the worst and then the best of holodeck episodes, and then I will do the most overrated and the most underrated episodes in Star Trek. So join me in November. Please subscribe if you have not already, and I shall see you soon. Goodbye.